Hello, my name's Simonez, and welcome to another Simonez Guide video. Today, we're finally talking about combat rogues. We're going to talk about why you would play combat, your talents, your gearing, your rotation, and we're going to talk about clearing up some common misconceptions about combat rogues. Let's get right to it and talk about why you would play a combat rogue. One of the big reasons is Expose Armor application. It's very easy to apply Expose Armor for your raid as combat using the Expose Armor Glyph. And while either Assassination or Combat can both apply Expose Armor and they experience a pretty similar individual damage loss for doing so, it's certainly much easier as a combat rogue. Another reason to bring Combat Rogue is the Savage Combat debuff that increases physical damage taken by 4%. This debuff is only shared with Arms Warriors. We know the state of Warriors. Raid would much rather have a Combat Rogue than an Arms Warrior to provide this 4% physical damage increase, which is a huge boost to overall raid DPS. Finally, some players prefer combat because they find it has a more engaging rotation. They like having these big damage cooldowns like Blade Flurry, Adrenaline Rush, and Killing Spree, and they like having to juggle multiple buffs and debuffs at a time. They find the gameplay much more fun. When it comes to actual damage output results, we can see from simulation tools and spreadsheets that both Assassination and Combat are very close to each other in this phase. In Phase 2, you'll see a little bit of an advantage of Assassination over Combat, and most phases, they're actually just really close. A common misconception about Combat is that, at a certain point in Wrath of Lich King, you have so much gear that Combat becomes just so much better, but our more modern, up-to-date simulation tools indicate that that's just not the case, that both of these specs remain competitive throughout the expansion. And you can see data from Warcraft logs for Phase 1 supports this, with Combat only being a fraction of a percentage point behind Assassination. Now, let's talk about your talents as a combat rogue. And talents for a combat rogue are pretty straightforward. The only difference between your different builds are going to be what weapon specialization talent you pick, either Close Quarters Combat, Hack and Slash, or Mace specialization. Now, in a vacuum, Hack and Slash is the most powerful of these. If you could pick between different weapons that all had the exact same stats, then you'd pick the swords and axes and you'd go with Hack and Slash. But that's not how it really works in the actual game. The weapons available aren't all the same, and they have different weapon types. What's much more important than the, tiny difference in power between these talents is the difference in power in the items you can actually acquire. So like in Phase 1, our most powerful weapons were Calamity's Grasp and Web Death, which meant we just picked the Close Quarters Combat talent. In Phase 2, we're looking at Golden Serenite Dragon and Blade Twister, so that's again Close Quarters Combat. We'll mix it up going into Phase 3 and Phase 4 as the other weapon types happen to be available in very strong options. In addition to your talents, we want to talk about your Glyphs. Glyphs have actually a lot of variability, unlike the talent specializations. There are a lot of good Glyphs and a lot of different situations you may find yourself in as a combat rogue, and in those different situations, you'll prefer using different Glyphs. To assist with this, I've created what you can see on screen here, which is a Glyph recommendation wizard. It asks you 5 questions about what you're trying to do on your combat rogue, and based on your answers to those, it recommends 3 different Glyphs. There's really not an easier way for me to recommend the different Glyphs, because, everyone's different. Some people are team players, some people are playing for individual boss parses, some people have to apply Expose Armor, some don't, some encounters are good for Killing Spree, some aren't. It's fairly complicated, and the wizard makes it very easy. You can find that linked in the video description to get some good Glyph recommendations for your specific situation. Now, let's get a little bit of information about gearing your character. We're going to talk about a few different topics in this section. First, we're looking at our stat priorities, our hit rating caps and our expertise rating caps. You can see on screen now a chart about your different hit rating caps. Many players don't really understand how hit rating works for rogues. The main cap that you're concerned about is your 17% spell hit chance for your poisons. You can have more hit rating than this, and it's totally fine because additional hit rating beyond this cap still increases the frequency that your auto attacks are successful. So while hit rating isn't as valuable of a stat beyond your 17% spell hit cap, it still adds to your damage. After your hit rating cap, you'd probably want to look at your expertise cap. Now, a lot of spreadsheets and simulator tools will tell you that, you don't need expertise, or like you're going to gain a small amount of DPS if you go below your expertise cap and gem attack power instead. And I'm not really concerned about a small amount of DPS in a spreadsheet or simulator tool. I'm much more concerned about the actual gameplay implications of making sure your abilities never fail. What can happen is you can press an ability expecting it to land and then do the next ability in your sequence, but then that first ability didn't actually land, and now you're all messed up. So I'd strongly suggest capping expertise on your combat rogue, even if a spreadsheet or simulator tool tells you it would be a small DPS gain not to. We also have armor penetration as a stat, and this is one of the most popular bad ideas I hear on the internet about combat rogues. This idea that armor penetration magically becomes good when you reach the cap. They say, the more armor penetration you have, the more valuable it is per point. And while that's true, the magnitude of this effect is just very minor. Like, it's a very small change in the damage gained per point of armor penetration near the cap and near zero. And armor penetration is a percentage scaling stat. It takes your current damage, multiplies it by a percentage. And you're never just gaining armor penetration, you're always gaining armor penetration instead of some other stat. And to make the percentage gain be a good idea, you have to be doing a lot of damage already to make the percentage gain a bigger gain than you would get from, say, stacking more attack power, critical strike, or haste. And that just doesn't really happen until you're in Icecrown Citadel gear level, roughly. Every single gear set you can build in Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, that's stacking armor penetration, just simulates as less damage output than a build that's going for hit and haste and attack power and just the best stats on the items they can find. For your weapons, like we talked about in the talent section, you're going to want 2 weapons that match one of your weapon specialization talents. For close quarters combat, that would be a fist weapon and a dagger. For hack and slash, that's a combination of axes and swords, and for mace specialization, that's 2 maces. And no matter what weapon types you're using, you're always going to want to have a slow main hand and a fast offhand. The slower the main hand, the better, and the faster the offhand, the better. The offhand speed is super important. There is a pretty big difference between finding a 1.4 offhand and a 1.5 offhand. This contributes to your deadly poison procs and to your combat potency procs. The faster weapon is just giving you more procs of these very valuable effects. You'll always be using instant poison on your main hand and deadly poison on your offhand as a combat rogue. Now, let's talk about your rotation. The abilities you should be pressing and when you should be pressing them to maximize your damage output and utility for your raid. We'll talk about both the opener and the sustained rotation. And each of these is going to be a little bit different depending on if you need to be applying expose armor for your raid or not. In the situations where you need to apply expose armor, that's just your number 1 priority, and when you don't need to apply expose armor, you can just ignore it. So when we talk about the rotation, we're going to assume you're applying expose armor, and if you're not, you can just cross that off at the top of the priority list and listen to the rest of the advice just fine. So for the opening sequence, I like to start with Sinister Strike, then Expose Armor. Get this up as early as possible. It's not just about your damage here. This is about maximizing the damage dealt by everyone in the raid. This is a very important debuff, and when it's your responsibility to apply Expose Armor, it's always the first thing that goes up, and it's always your highest priority to maintain. So Sinister, Expose Armor, and then if I get a combo point off of that Expose Armor from my Ruthlessness talent, I can immediately do a Slice and Dice. If not, then it's a Sinister Strike, then a 1-point Slice and Dice. Now I've got my Slice and Dice going, I'm generally going to Blade Flurry, and then I'm going to wait until one of my powerful trinkets like Mirror of Truth or Blood of the Old God or Mjolnir Runestone trigger. These are trinkets that make my killing spree very good. And while I'm waiting for these trinkets to trigger, I'm just going to be mashing a couple Sinister Strikes to keep my energy low. As soon as one of those trinkets triggers, I'm going to press my killing spree, and as soon as the killing spree is over, I'll press my Adrenaline Rush. Then I want to get a big 5-point Rupture before that trinket buff fades, especially with a trinket like Mirror of Truth that's giving me bonus attack power that really juices up the value of Rupture. And that I consider the end of the opening sequence. Once you've burned your Blade Flurry, your killing spree, your Adrenaline Rush, you've got a Rupture up, you've got your Slice and Dice and Expose running. there's your opener. Then we're going to transfer into what we call the sustained rotation. For the sustained rotation, you're really thinking about a priority queue. You can't strictly prescribe the order or sequence of abilities you're going to do or the specific combo points of finishing moves you're going to use, because you're really managing a lot of random resource generation through combo points from Ruthlessness and energy from combat potency. You can have, huge surplus of energy from a lot of procs in a short amount of time, or you can have a pretty big drought of energy and combo points from getting a bit unlucky. So you need to be able to understand how to read the situation and prioritize what abilities you're going to use and how you're going to spend your combo points. As someone applying Expose Armor, you always want to prioritize Expose Armor no matter what. You don't let that drop off. So Expose Armor is your first priority, and you want to use 1 point finishing moves to do that. Your next priority is Slice and Dice. Slice and Dice is a huge personal damage increase. Not only is it increasing your personal damage output, it's increasing your energy generation through combat potency procs to help you maintain and juggle all these different abilities. While you prefer to use 4 or 5 combo point Slice and Dices as the most efficient, this is the most flexible of the combo point values of all your finishers, and sometimes you'll be using 1, 2, or 3 combo point values if the situation forces you into that. After Slice and Dice comes Rupture. This is a great damage over time ability that you can put on the enemy, and one you really prefer to use 4 or 5 combo points for. Now, Rupture is lower on your priority list than Slice and Dice. If Slice and Dice and Rupture are going to drop at the same time, you always refresh Slice and Dice. But if you can, you'd prefer to spend less combo points on Slice and Dice if it means you get to spend more combo points on Rupture. So if you're in a situation where you have to choose between either spending high combo points on Slice and Dice or high combo points on Rupture, you do the low point Slice and Dice and the high point Rupture. Now, we've covered pretty much all of the basics about playing combat specialization, but it's a pretty difficult spec to play well, and there are going to be a lot of situations that come up that make you deviate from this basic plan that I've laid out. One thing that can happen while you're doing your sustained rotation is you may have Expose Armor, Rupture, and or Slice and Dice ending at the same time or just within a couple seconds of each other. And this is not great because it makes it very difficult to maintain all 3 of these buffs and debuffs. Also makes it difficult to spend the combo point values on them that you really want to be spending rather than panic refreshing them. Really, the only way to avoid this kind of situation is to plan ahead better. A lot of being good at combat is knowing how to plan ahead 10 or 15 seconds into the future to decide what you should do right now. For example, if you've got 4 combo points and you've got 15 seconds left on your Slice and Dice, you do not want to cast the 4-point Rupture right now, because that's a 14-second duration. It'll end at basically the same time as your Slice and Dice. Instead of that, hit another Sinister Strike, go up to 5 points, wait just a couple seconds, and then hit a 5-point Rupture. And then your Slice and Dice and your Rupture will be ending, many seconds apart from each other, which should make it much easier to maintain both of these effects at combo point values that you prefer. Another thing that somewhat frequently will happen is you'll have all your buffs up, your Expose Armor, Slice and Dice, and Rupture. You'll be maxed out on combo points, and you won't be able to wait long enough for one of these to expire. You're going to have to do something with your energy or combo points. Many players will try to fit an Eviscerate in here, but I can say, usually do not do that. Eviscerate is almost always a trap. It is an incredibly bad ability in converting combo points and energy into damage. Oftentimes when I have all of my buffs and debuffs up and I have an excess of energy and combo points, I'm just going to press an additional Sinister Strike or 2 to prevent me from capping energy, and then refresh my Rupture or refresh my Slice and Dice or refresh my Expose Armor later. Let's talk about Killing Spree. Sometimes Killing Spree is bad when you only care about damage dealt to the boss and there are a lot of adds around that you don't care about. When you press Killing Spree, your character will jump around to them, dealing damage to them, stopping dealing damage to the boss, and it may pull you out of position. You may even spend a couple seconds running back to the boss to start damaging it again. If that's the situation, that there are a lot of adds nearby that you don't care about dealing damage to them, you don't want to press your Killing Spree. You want to wait till those adds are dead, till the boss is isolated, so then you can press your Killing Spree when it will all go onto the boss and it won't screw up your character's position. On single target encounters, we can press our Blade Flurry right in the opener, right with all of our other cooldowns and trinket procs, and it's great. However, whenever there's an opportunity to hit multiple targets with Blade Flurry, and all those targets are targets you care about dealing damage to, you will always prioritize pressing all of your cooldowns and saving your Blade Flurry for that opportunity window to hit 2 targets with your Blade Flurry. Blade Flurry hitting 2 targets nearly doubles your damage output and doubles the effectiveness of most of your other cooldowns. So you will forego the normal opening sequence that involves using those cooldowns and hold them off until the opportunity to hit 2 targets with Blade Flurry presents itself. Then when you can hit 2 targets with Blade Flurry, you will put up your Blade Flurry. Ideally, you have a Slice and Dice running already, and you will hit your Adrenaline Rush, and you'll get your Killing Spree in all during the Blade Flurry to really maximize the doubling effect of the Blade Flurry, which doubles the value of those other cooldowns. It's very important. If you have an opportunity to hit 2 targets with Blade Flurry, you always do it. A lot of people strongly emphasize stacking your cooldowns together or stacking your cooldowns with random trinket procs. Now, when you wait with your cooldowns for these random trinket procs, you're delaying activating them. And while normally, yes, it is good to stack your cooldowns with as many other cooldowns and as many triggered buffs as you can to maximize their damage output, what you don't want to do is delay your cooldown usage so long that it reduces the total number of uses that you get during the fight. Using Killing Spree twice is always better and is always a lot better than using Killing Spree only once but stacking it with some fancy trinket procs or something. This is pretty hard to know ahead of time if delaying using one of your cooldowns is going to result in fewer uses of it during the fight. So this is something that kind of requires planning ahead and knowing your guild's kill times to know how much wiggle room you have to delay on these cooldowns without affecting the total number of casts. Glyph of Sinister Strike. A lot of the old guides for combat hail this glyph as the best glyph ever, super duper important. You have to use Glyph of Sinister Strike, and you may find if you use my glyph recommendation wizard that it almost never recommends you to use this glyph. It will sometimes, but not often. The problem with Glyph of Sinister Strike is twofold. One, that it's giving you extra resources in terms of combo points when you pretty much already have enough resources to maintain your good abilities, Expose Armor, Slice and Dice, and Rupture. So when you get even more combo points, you usually end up spending them inefficiently or spending them on significantly worse abilities like Eviscerate. Gaining additional combo points that just get spent on Eviscerate just isn't a very strong effect. The second problem with Glyph of Sinister Strike is its random nature. It's a 50% chance on a critical strike Sinister Strike. So you're looking at, roughly a 1 in 4 per Sinister Strike or a little less to get an extra combo point. The random nature of it means it's hard to predict when you will get these points, which makes it more difficult to spend them efficiently because you can't plan ahead with them. So overall, I generally don't recommend the Glyph of Sinister Strike. I believe it is one of the weaker glyphs, and our more modern simulation and spreadsheet tools agree with this. Thank you for watching me talk about combat. I hope you have learned a lot about this specialization. I know this has been a very anticipated video that people have asked for a lot, and I really hope you enjoy this video that I've made. I delayed making this video for so long because I don't play combat in raids that much. I wanted to gain enough experience with the specialization that I was confident in my knowledge of the spec before I went and made a video advising other people about it. I hope you can learn a lot about this specialization. I hope you enjoy playing combat, and I hope you have fun in World of Warcraft. Thanks for watching the Simonized Show. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Can't wait for more sweet videos? Links are on screen that you can watch right now. Be sure to join the Discord server and pop by on Twitch to catch me live. Links to both are in the video description. Thank you for watching and have a great day.